Welcome to Becoming a Web Dev. And for everyone who is a student of mine right now, thank you for actually watching this because I don't really see a point in having a book for a web development class. So if you have a question, all my examples that you see in class are here and probably a few more that are added in. And anyone else coming from YouTube or wherever else in the world, hello. And this class or course online is for you as well, because I'm still going to show you all the things that you would typically learn in a college course on web development, or at least the introduction to it for, an entire semester. Now, one thing I want to preface here is saying that you aren't going to walk away being a master, because mastery comes with a lot of practice, having a job, doing a lot of projects, all of that other stuff. So any title, any course that says become a master after watching this video is just a lie. This is to show you the basics of HTML, CSS, JavaScript. We do a little jQuery in there, and then we work with APIs and databases and whatnot. And also responsive websites. So the point is just to give you a really good, proper foundation, show you ways to problem solve, websites to check out, and plenty of code examples so that when y'all make projects, go get internships, or go on and get a career, that you already have a strong baseline of what makes a good website, and you could just stack your knowledge on top of that. So let's go ahead and get to the next section, which is what do you need for this class and how to set it up. So the first thing you're going to need for this course is Visual Studio Code. Now, in the future, a decade from now, if this is still a popular video, I don't know, there may be a better solution, but for right now, we're going to use Visual Studio Code. This is what I use even when I'm at work. It's what a lot of my coworkers use. It's what a lot of other developers across the world use. And it's really cool because not only does it, have the ability not just to do websites, but other languages as well. It has IntelliSense, which means it starts to understand what you're trying to type and offers you completions for it, which is cool because making websites, you do a lot of repetitive things, and it is nice just to speed that work up. You could run and debug, which is cool. We will get to that a little bit later in the course, but say your website is screwing up somewhere, you could set certain breakpoints where you could run it, and you could hone in on where the issue could be. Built-in Git. As of right now, I've not decided whether or not we're going to do Git in this course, but this gives you the ability to send your code to an online repo, so you're not saving it locally on your computer like version 1, version 2, version 3, and you're trying to figure out which one you added the code to make the picture appear, or which one has the corrections you need. Git and GitHub, GitLab are good repositories to keep your code in a safe spot. And Git is the, language or the software that handles that for you. I wouldn't worry about that right now. And then the big thing here is extensions. Extensions are, we could see these things right here. And they're nice little, you would say plugins, or if they want to use the word extensions here, that help you way beyond what Visual Studio Code will give you out of the box. It will give you more completions, highlighting, advanced IntelliSense, and other stuff. And these are packages that other people have made to make your workflow easier. So what I would do is click on download. If you are using a Mac, that should be fine. If you're using a brand new Mac, it may ask you if you're using Apple Silicon. I would select that option. But if you're on a Windows machine, just click download and install and then open it. But there could be other instances too, where you are not wanting to code on Visual Studio Code, but you may just want to whip up something really, really quickly. Or maybe you're looking at someone else's example and it brings you to this website. And this is jsfiddle.net. This is where you write your HTML, your CSS, and then your JavaScript. I do believe you have the ability to, add extra stuff in here, other packages and libraries. If you don't know what that means right now, don't worry. And then your result is right in here. So if I was to come here and do something like, I'll get to run it. I get a hello right here. And so this is pretty cool. You will see some people's code repos in JS Fiddle. So if you just want to also tinker around with something, this is a great website to go to do that. Another really good website is CodeSandbox.io. This is where you could build not just standard websites, but do stuff in React, Vue, Angular, and a whole lot of other combinations. And you could also set up your environments to do cool specific stuff. So this is another insanely popular one. I see a lot of code examples that in their documentation, if you want to see how something runs, there'll be a link. You click it, and usually it's a CodeSandbox. And so this is really neat and interesting, and this could hook up to your GitHub or I believe GitLab account as well. I have it hooked up to my GitHub account. So this is a really, really good resource, and I think it's super cool. And this is worth taking a look at some point, during the semester. And it's just scrolling down here. Yeah, you could work together on this. You could download packages, integrate it with GitHub. I don't think it'll do it with GitLab. I haven't tested it. But yeah, it's super cool. This is another one that is super popular. I don't know if this is more popular than CodeSandbox, but I see a lot of examples in CodePen here. And you could sign up, you could have your own account on all these. I think you have to have your own account if you want to save your work. But this is another area where not only could you write your code, but you could look at other people's code as well, which is super cool. So you get to see a lot of really awesome CSS work, but also just other cool concepts and ideas. You could also still do advanced stuff on here with other packages and languages. And I recommend checking this out, not just to write your own code, but to get inspiration from other people who have their projects public. The last one I'm going to point out is Replit, or is it Replit? This is this really weird thing for me to say, but this is really, really helpful as well. This is essentially the same as the previous online IDEs that we have seen. I like using this. And I think what's cool about it for me is that you're able to, if you need like a quick little, IDE to run some code in. So let's do this, for example. So here we have replit.com/languages/node.js. Now, if you're doing intro to web, you may have heard of Node, but you may also be like, I have no clue what Node is. And I like this because if you want to do it in Node or do something in JavaScript, I'm going to say largely, at least for the intro level, if you're running code in here, it's pretty interchangeable. But you could come into here and you could run your JavaScript or Node. It's all JavaScript at the end of the day, or any other language you want to. You have Java, C++, Ruby, Go, Python. And so if you want to take your logic that you're working with in your website and just slap it in here and hit run, you could go ahead and do that and then test out your ideas, because I think that is insanely helpful sometimes, because sometimes your logic, it's just easier to pull out, I feel, in some cases, and see if it works in and of itself before you start hooking it up to other pieces of your website. But now let's go back to Visual Studio Code on my computer, and I'm going to show you some of the plugins that I use that are super helpful. Now that you have Visual Studio Code open, I have it open here as well, or maybe you don't have it open at home. You're just staring at what I'm doing. It doesn't matter. But I have this file here. This file does not matter. It's some script that I wrote to get a bunch of videos out of a lot of folders, so I wouldn't have to click and drag a lot. But it's neither here nor there. So you have this open. You're pretty sure by now in your college careers, you know how to open files and all that other jazz. So let's look at plugins or the extensions that make your life easier. So we're going to click into here, and I have a lot of them for a lot of random things I've done, but I'm going to point out some of the ones that I like. But first, you're going to see things like themes. Where else do I have themes in here? Material theme icons, material theme, other stuff like this. So you don't have to have it look boring. There's actually a lot of people out there that work to make this IDE look colorful and awesome. So I recommend playing around with the icons and the themes because it's just like sleeping on a mattress, right? You're going to be spending a lot of time sleeping, so it might as well be comfortable. If you're going to spend a lot of time coding in your careers, you might want to like what you're looking at. But let's go ahead and start with this one right here. Auto rename tag. This one is one of those time savers that you appreciate so much more down the road. So we haven't gotten to HTML, the syntax, but let's just look at what the example is doing right here. So we have an A right here, and you see as it changes one end of the tag, it changes it on the other side, and C up here as well. This is great because even in these examples, there's so many, or only so many, elements. So these divs, you haven't learned what those are yet. The body, HTML, you haven't learned what those are yet. But imagine you have like 500 or 600 lines of code. And you can see how this div is inside of this div, inside of this div. And trying to find the pairing closing tag, which is the / div right here, could be a giant pain in the butt. And you could end up screwing some stuff up that you may not realize till you're down the road. And I've done that before. Now, is this 100% perfect? Oh, no, not at all. But this does save you a heck of a lot of time. And I highly suggest installing this auto rename tag. Another one that may help you out a lot is better comments. I'm not a power user of this, but as you can see down in here, we have the different kind of comments you could have. So you have the / asterisk, and then the asterisk, and then the close right here. But then depending upon what you use inside of there, it highlights it differently. So if you're coding for yourself, you could leave comments in your, JavaScript. And so this is kind of nice if you have to come back to something. You could say, hey, I'm writing to do : and then you could pick up where you left off. I know you probably aren't using, any kind of version control, GitHub, which if you do know how to use it, I recommend using it right out of the gate. But these are nice little ways to leave notes to yourself, and I do like the color coordination. Another is the bracket pair colorizer. When we get into JavaScript, it'll be nice because you could click this squiggly bracket right here, and it will show you where the closing one is. This is very, very, very nice because sometimes you just have a lot of squiggly brackets everywhere, a lot of nested code, and it's a nice way to find out where something begins and where something ends, because even if it's not a ton of code on the page, let's face it, you're staring at the screen forever, you're prone to making mistakes, you think something is nested when it isn't, and then you spend an hour realizing, you were looking at your function incorrectly. Next thing is a color picker. This is super, super awesome. So when we're doing CSS, it will bring up this little box here. And so you're going to have your hex code. And so it's showing the example of how to use it. But what you could do is you could just click and drag, and then you just have that color picker there for you. So you're not constantly guessing or bouncing to another website to figure out what color you may want or need. This is a really, really fun one. ESLint, I'd say, is important if you want it. We may not get into ESLint in this course, but this is just a way to set up rules for your JavaScript so it's cleaner, neater, and is just formatted better. This is if you want to look into that kind of stuff. I'm not going to cover it, really answer any questions about it. But just know that when you get into the professional world, you will 99.9999% chances see this file or this package or plugin on any given project. This is another nice one here. This highlight matching tag. As we come down here, if we were to look at this, we could see that it is underlining the matching tag. So what's opening and what's closing. I know we have the bracket colorizer thing we looked at earlier, but this is just another way to kind of do like dual highlighting to check out where we are in code. I like that as much as I can because maybe my eyes are just going, but it just helps me navigate a lot easier. This one is super cool. IntelliSense for CSS names. This sometimes is a hit or a miss, but it is nice to have any kind of extra IntelliSense that you could get. So if you are using something here, I think this may be Bootstrap, which I do believe we cover this semester. It will go through and say, oh, you have these kind of special design classes available to you when you're using CSS. And it just helps you write them faster. It doesn't give you the answer, but it will lead you to the possibilities of what you may want quicker. So there's less jumping between a website and the documentation and back here. The other one, which I like, and that at least I'm going to use heavily, is Live Server. You download this, and when you have an HTML site, it should down here in the corner have something like Go Live. I'm sure y'all see me use this either in class or through my examples online. This is a nice way just to have a server load for you when you have just a plain old boring normal website. Because with PHP, you typically would have to have other software that would set up the server so you can query the databases and do all that other stuff. This is a very nice, lightweight version to just from inside of your IDE, open your website to see how it will look in an actual browser. This is a must. The next thing I would recommend here is Path IntelliSense. So this is really cool because you are going to have folders, files, folders inside of folders. And this is a very, very, very helpful way of wondering where to go to a certain file. Now, for a lot of the intro stuff, you may be like, oh, that's not very hard for me to locate where something is. But when you're working on extremely large projects, like for instance, one I'm working on at work for a front-end project, it is hundreds of files and folders within folders. And having a Path IntelliSense helps you navigate and locate resources way faster than just looking in your directory. So this is another must in my opinion. Peacock is cool. I don't think it'd be super useful for this course, but if you have multiple Visual Studio Code windows open, this is a super cool way to colorize certain windows. So that way, if it's green, you know you're working on this project. If it's blue, you're working on this other project. And I think that is pretty cool as well. I've used it before. Like I said, it's not necessary for this class, but I think it would be super helpful if you like that stuff. Another one here is Prettier. This is very, 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 very common. Let me scroll real quick. Okay, so there's only one more. So Prettier is a code formatter, and it just allows you to, let's see if they have an example in here. And they tell you in here details how to set it up. Do they have a visual example? No, they do not. But what I do is, so I download this, there's a install button, or it says uninstall, but there'll be an install button. I believe you go to the settings right here. I type in format, and it says default formatter. It says defines the default formatter, which takes precedence over all other formatter settings. And then you'll have like a bazillion in here. And what I do is just choose Prettier. And then I have for the editor format on save. And I just click that, and it just organizes your code so it is just easier to read. Does it fix anything and everything about your code? No. Does it sometimes format things in a way where you're like, that's a bunch of garbage, I don't like it like that? 100%. Or you're looking at two very similar things on the page and one is formatted slightly different than the other. Stuff like that happens too. But overall, the wins for this thing are way greater than the losses. And I do recommend installing this and setting it up. And right here, this Visual Code or Visual Studio IntelliCode, I have this installed as well. It's just more IntelliSense to help you out with your code, give you lots of suggestions and stuff you could do. Anything that could help me write faster and move to what I want to, the better. And to be honest, I don't memorize a lot of stuff. I just know kind of what the possibilities are, what I'm allowed to do. And sometimes when you work in JavaScript forever, there are things you just memorize because you do them over and over and over and over again. But you're not going to memorize everything because the ecosystem of coding is just too freaking massive. So IntelliSense stuff like this is not cheating. It doesn't mean you're not as good of a developer. It just means you could execute your ideas quicker and look stuff up faster. Like I said, I don't really memorize much. I just kind of know it's possible. And then I just make the steps one at a time to create my vision of what I need. And I think that's all for now. So that is how I would initially set up Visual Studio Code here. So the next section, what we're going to do is look at helpful websites to go to where you could ask questions, look at stuff, look at examples, get help. And then after that, I think we start looking at HTML. So let's go ahead and get looking at places where we could go to get help when we have a million questions. So now we're going to be looking at the helpful websites where if you have questions, you could go and get help. And the most obvious one is Google. You could see, all the sites I go to, I frequent, LinkedIn, Newegg. Don't ever get addicted to U2s. I order way too many of those things and they have no real material value other than the fact I laugh. But, what happens when you're coding is you'll get a problem. Something won't work or you don't know how to do something. And so you may ask a question and then get results that don't necessarily answer what you're going for. And this isn't always your fault, and I'm not the kind of person that'll say, well, it is your fault. You need to go back to the drawing board. But one thing that I've learned over time is how do I reword something to be more and more and more specific? And there are some times when I've asked some questions that are good questions about how does this CSS transition work, or why is my JavaScript not working in a certain way I want it to? And at a very high level, I'm asking a very legitimate question. But what I find is that sometimes I need to keep refining my word choice. And over time, I get more and more specific about what it is that I need help with. And so Google is a good place for that. And so when you're on here and you are looking at the results and they may differ from what you want, what I would do first of all is ask yourself, what are the words and the problems you're seeing appear? And what are the similarities and differences from what you're asking? And then try a new way to reword the question you're trying to get out there. I know that sounds kind of complex and there's no magic solution for it, but it's just a method you're going to have to produce and work on to hopefully find a solution or a path forward that someone else has already carved. This is another really good website, Stack Overflow. I actually went to the homepage. I don't know what their homepage looked like until now because I always got there from Google, which is kind of funny. I wonder what their metrics are like for the rest of their pages compared to their homepage. But Stack Overflow is the motherlode of questions and answers on here. And there may not always be the exact answer you want on here, but for a lot of general issues, you will find that a lot of people have come across similar situations. And then there's also upvoting and downvoting on solutions. And one thing that I want to point out is there will be like I think a green check mark for the approved solution, but don't always focus your attention there because things change or sometimes things are wrongly checkmarked. Sometimes there'll be also adequate solutions that aren't checked marked on here. So look at the responses to an initial code issue or a question asked and ask yourself, is this the most reliable thing for me to do, most reliable path for me to take? And look at the responses. Another thing I recommend here is when you see the code examples, don't just copy and paste. Write it on your own, try and understand it and implement it in your code. If you just start copying and pasting other people's code, things could get hazardous pretty quickly. So whenever I see a solution on here, there may be like one line of something that I copy and paste out, but a wholesale giant solution, I'll never do that. I'll always write it out because there are most likely going to be nuances between your code and then the code that you're bringing in to solve your problem. So just keep that in mind. W3 Schools is insanely helpful. It has tutorials on everything, and I mean everything. Anything we're doing in this class, or most everything, should be covered in here. Now, you don't have to go and do, I think they have like certificate stuff on here you could do, but you could learn a lot of stuff in here. Now, is it going to show you every complex corner case thing you could do? No, but it is insanely helpful, and I will most likely use this in class. I'll reference it in future videos as well, because I don't always memorize everything, and I think I've said that before. So sometimes I'll need to come in for a quick syntax update, or, how do I add a text shadow in this specific way? And so I'll, click on something in CSS, look up the box shadow or the drop shadow, I should say, and be like, yes, that's the example I want to start off with. So this is a wealth of information, especially from a beginner standpoint, and also for a quick reference guide. Free Code Camp is super cool. There's a lot of projects and certificate stuff you can do through here. They also have a lot of tutorials up here. So if you're going to come up here and do, just type in HTML, web applications for everyone, learn HTML and CSS in Spanish. I don't speak Spanish, but if you do, you could learn it in Spanish. And this is an incredibly popular website. They also have a YouTube channel as well, which is super cool. And it is just a very good place to go. And you'll see this in your search results alongside Stack Overflow and various other websites. Dev.to is a blog site here. And so this may not always be the problem solution that you may be looking for, but it does have a lot of articles on different aspects of the industry, different problems, projects people are working on. And so it may not be at the top of your list. It is a very, very good way, though, for you to see what other people are doing in the community, reach out, comment, get inspiration. And you can even ask questions on their posts as well. And so if you're really looking at a future into doing web development, this would be a site I would bookmark, because I think it is just helpful to see what the community is doing and working on out there. Lastly, there's this site. It's the MDN Web Docs. This is maintained by Mozilla, and this is the docs for like all things HTML, CSS, JavaScript, APIs. They don't have everything there is to know, and some of it I find is a little dated at times. The same when we jump into JavaScript. Everything we're going to talk about in class, they cover in explicit detail. Now, sometimes the writing is at times dense in some areas. So you may be like, what does that word mean? What does that word mean? You have to Google it and come back. But overall, this is great. They have a lot of code examples, and they walk you from beginner step levels to more advanced stuff. And it's also great because you learn a lot about the history, other technologies, and they give you a very high level as well as a low level look at stuff like JavaScript, CSS, HTML, because at this level in your careers in college, or if you're just coming in online and you're brand new, you kind of want to mix, right? You want to know how to get up and going. You want to make a website, do some stuff, but it also does help out to know some history, why things work and why things became the way they are. Because having a history, a knowledge of the history and knowing why JavaScript is the way it is, you start to learn peculiarities, which then later on build into better strategies for you writing more clear, vibrant, meaningful, and maintainable code. So most of you all may be just looking for a way to complete your assignments, your homework, all that other stuff. But if you do have some downtime here or there, I do recommend, even if it's on like a brief topic that you only need to complete an assignment, do a little bit of background reading on it, because it could only help you in your career. And when you talk to someone for an interview, for an internship, or an actual job, it's not just enough to know the code sometimes, but if you could throw in the fact that you know a little bit of history of why, the usefulness, some other things about it as well, they know that you just don't write code, but you have kind of a passion and respect for the history of it. And if you're interviewing with someone, odds are they have a lot of experience as well. So that's a nice flag to them of saying, hey, I'm not just here for coding, but I'm also here because I want to be, a codesmith or something along those lines. But those are just my suggestions of some of the helpful websites you can get started with to get going. In the next section, we're actually going to get to writing some HTML. Forgot some words there. So I'll see y'all in a moment. Actually, one last thing before we begin looking at HTML. That is, whenever you go into any of these sites and you're asking a question, first off, it is very easy to read. Stuff is negative or rude online. It just is. There's been times when I've joked or said something and I mean goodwill, all the niceties in the world, and then someone thinks for whatever reason I'm being a jerk. And that may happen to you as well. Certain word choices, life experiences, things just happen, right? So what I would recommend is trying to be as polite as possible and be as helpful and as kind as possible, and use uplifting, positive words to show that you just aren't being rude. So I would go and do a tone check on stuff you write. And that's also good for when you get in the office or an interview or send an email at the office, because to you, your word choice may sound just fine. But to someone else who doesn't know you, who was raised differently or has just had different background experiences, you may sound like a gigantic jerk. So that is one thing to keep in mind. Another is, if you have a config file, and we're not going to really have those in this class, we may towards the end, but if you have something special that helps your code run, it is very helpful to show what that is with a screenshot or something along those lines. Also, if you ask a question and it's beyond just a general talking point concept, show the code that doesn't work for you and express what you want it to do and what your outcome should be. And this also kind of goes hand in hand with explain the steps. So if you have a button on a screen, you click the button and then your website blows up, let them know that that's the step, because you want to be able to trace back what went wrong so others could help you out. So these are the things. Just be nice. Don't be a jerk. Try to, go out of your way to be as polite as you can, although that won't always work. Show your code examples. Show your config files if you have any, or if they ask you to and you forget, just provide those. And then express what you want the end result to be and write out the steps to reproduce the issue that you are having. And that should make everyone in the community a lot happier, and it should get you a result a lot quicker, because no one wants to look at code or imagine what code you've written, if you make it as easy as possible for someone to help you, odds are the quicker you'll get a response. So now let's go and look at some HTML. So now we ask the question, what is HTML? All HTML is, it's a markup language. That means it is information about the content that will appear on the website. This content could be, a form that you would fill out, text, links, images, even more abstract stuff. It's basically the skeleton of any web page you go to. And so this may sound really, really odd because you may have not made a website yet in your life. And if we talk about HTML and then CSS and then JavaScript, it could get a little messy, and it's just getting too far ahead of the subject matter here. So let's bring it back and just discuss things like text. I think text is pretty easy because we've all written papers, typed stuff out, used PowerPoint, Excel, all that other stuff in our lives so far. And so if you've done any of those things, you, in kind of an indirect way, have already made a website. You, with a paper, give it, for your paper, a header, right? You say, this subject on biology by Bernie the dog, because my dog is walking around me right now. You will have different paragraphs for your introduction and then your supporting arguments down below. You may even have subheaders. If your paper is really long, you may have, section 1, section 1.4. And then when you get to your bibliography, you may have a certain part where there's italicize some of your font because there's standardizations and rules for that. And you could bold some text if you want to put emphasis on there. Or say you're doing some kind of data report and you have pictures that you want to show, graphs, information, that kind of stuff, right? So in a lot of ways, everyone has already, since grade school, kind of made a website to some degree, except a browser is not reading your term paper or anything like that. So don't think this is too big or daunting of a task. This is just, taking what you've done in other subjects and giving it to a browser with, some other kind of specialties alongside of it and saying, hey, make a website. So I'm starting to ramble on now. So let's make our first basic website here, and I'll explain what Visual Studio Code does out of the gate. So I'm in a folder. It's on my desktop. It's called Temp for Web. Name yours something much more important. I have a billion folders on my computer, so temp or delete me is assigned to just that, delete it later. So I'm going to come in here. I'm going to type index.html. So I'm in here now, and this is the second thing I always do. I do this, and you see this thing called emit abbreviation. Is this special to HTML? And the answer is no. What this is doing is it's shorthand. So emit is the shorthand plugin built into Visual Studio Code, and I'll go over it later in this video, not in explicit detail, but there are some really cool cheat sheets out there. And so when I hit exclamation point, or some people call this bang, I do this. And now I have this website right here. It's not quite a website yet because it's not running in a browser, but it's everything that we need. And so you're looking at this and you're like, okay, so what does all this mean? There's a lot of stuff here. You were just talking about writing a paper. Ooh, this is a little weird. So let's start at the top and work our way down. And so we have doctype HTML up here. And this just tells the browser that this is going to be an HTML5. If you look at other websites, you're going to see that maybe it doesn't say this. Maybe there's other variants, flavors, previous iterations of HTML, because after all, this is HTML5. So You may not always see this in every website you come across, but this is still, you have some kind of standardized doc type of tag here at the top saying, hey, what you're about ready to read is of this format, because there are certain things that are special to HTML5 that may not be to its previous predecessors. So it just gives some extra instructions to the browser. We have HTML right here, and then we have the lang equals en. So this means that it's going to establish this in English. So when we write out our code, it's going to assume that we're writing it in standard English here. So then we go into the head here. And what the head is doing is essentially, this is a lot of information about your web page. And you see all of these meta tags here, and we'll talk about them in a moment. But if you go to a Best Buy, Walmart, other Amazon, right, you may see a zillion of these meta tags, because you could do a lot of interesting things with these tags. There are descriptions about your website. There are keyword meta tags that you could add on in. And that's not the focus of this class. That would probably be something closer to like SEO or something else along those lines. And what we want to do for the course of the semester is just focus on the basics, but just know that there's a lot of other things you could do inside of the head element and then these child meta tags. So this one right here is UTF-8. And all this says right here for this character set or char set, it specifies the character encoding to be used for the HTML document. So this is standard, that's fine. And then we have this stuff right here. And this essentially controls what version of Internet Explorer should be rendered when this content is displayed. And I don't come in and delete this. Internet Explorer is thankfully dead. No one really liked it. So you could kind of just ignore this right here. And then the next one here is the viewport content equals, or width equals device width, initial scale is 1.0. And so this scales to the device it is being viewed on. It does not mean that your website is responsive to the fullest extent. I heard someone say that once, that they were in a class and this meant their website was responsive. And I got a little frightened, because it'll help. It'll do some special stuff for your website, but there's a lot of other work you have to do to meet or respectfully meet that responsive consideration for different mobile sizes. And don't worry about all that yet. We're going to get to the responsive section later. But just know that this helps scale if you're going to be on a tablet compared to, a 36-inch wide monitor or something crazy. The next thing is this title document. So it just says document here. So if you've ever had a tab, and if you're like me, you have a billion tabs, and then you wonder why your computer's running slow, it's because Chrome is eating, 3/4 of your memory on your computer. This is the name of the tab that's going to be displayed up above. So this just says document here. So let's type in my first website. We're going to save this. All right. So keep in mind that we had the prettier type of plugin. So when I hit save, you notice it kind of formatted and made this move to one line, the body open and the body close. So if you just notice that, it's no big deal. It's something that we've already talked about. So also in the head, you could do a bunch of other interesting stuff. You could do CSS in the head. I don't recommend it. When we get to CSS, I'll explain that. But don't overlook the important things that could go on in here. So next up is the body. The body, you have the opening and the closing. And you also notice that the head has an opening and closing. This opens and this closes. And how do you know? Well, there's no / here, but there's a / here. Maybe online you've seen something like this. When someone's complaining or whatever, they'll be a / rant. And this means end rant in internet speak. And so where did they get that from? They got that from HTML body. And then this right here between these brackets says end the body. What goes in here? All of your content. And I mean all your HTML, your JavaScript, although yes, I guess there may be ways of getting around that. Maybe I'm thinking about I'm getting a little too out of the box here, but I would say 99.999% of everything is going to go in here. And then we have this HTML tag right here, and it just wraps around the head and then the body. And this is the HTML content that's going to be, displayed. And so let's go ahead and do something fun here. So I'm going to come in and say H1. So this is a heading tag right here. And so you could think of these like headings on a paper. When you have like your giant heading, biology, cell division or whatever, that's the title of your paper. H1 is the big one. It's large, and it also signifies to the engine, or most likely Google viewing it, that this is what your page is about. So you don't want to be just throwing H1s everywhere, because that, for ranking, although there may be way more important things, you kind of want to be strategic about what each page is trying to do and trying to accomplish here. So I got a little bit into the weeds there. So let's just go ahead and do I love my dog, Bernie. I love him actually way more than I should. You're probably going to see a million examples involving my dog. So we have I love my dog, Bernie. And let's go ahead and add some text below. I'm going to hit P. And you notice that Emmet is coming up again. And it says Emmet abbreviation. What does P do? We hit it. It creates an opening closing tag. And this is our paragraph tag. So let's come in here and say, I really like my dog. I work from home, and he is the best coworker ever. So now that I have this, let's go ahead and do the live server. So I'm going to hit on my Windows machine, Control-Shift-P, and we see we have live server right here. I didn't have to type it in, but if you want to, you'd most likely type in live server. It's starting up and opened on another window here. And voila. I really like my dog, and I work from home, and he's the best coworker ever. And so this is cool, but what if you don't want to use live server? So what we could do is we could come into here and we could, let's see, where is it at? Reveal in File Explorer. Let me bring this on over here. I don't know why it chose Opera. I don't really like Opera. But what we could do is you could just double click on this and it will open it up. But you may think, why do you have a live server? Why don't you just open it up here? And the thing is that live, this server here, let me see if I could bring this on over. The reason why I like live server so much and why it may benefit you is that if I come down here again, and let's say I make another paragraph tag full of text, I could say something like, this should hot reload. And I didn't even save it yet, but it read that changes were being made and it automatically updated it. Whereas if I had I just clicked it in my File Explorer, right in here, if I just double clicked this, I would have to hit refresh every single time I made a change. And while that's fine, that's not a big drag on your workload. having a hot reload that just knows when you're changing the document. It's just those seconds, milliseconds over your collegiate career and then your actual career. And it's just stuff like this where, if I could save, an hour out of my entire year on this using hot reload stuff, they start to add up. And so that's why I showed you the extensions in the beginning. And there's even more advanced stuff you could do to make your work faster. So I'm just trying to show you the way that I work. But what I suggest for you to do now is to go ahead, open up your Visual Studio Code or whatever editor you're doing. Try this right here, type it all in, try using the live reload. And what we're going to see in our next section of here is we're going to add a little bit more to this website. We're going to learn how to link from one page to another, add an image, and some other fun stuff. Alrighty. So we just did this example here, but what if we wanted to add another page? What if we wanted to add an image? We're not going to get too crazy here, although what I plan to do at the end of this video is show you what it would look like just making a plain HTML page if I just looked online for random stuff to add. But for right now, I just want to incrementally do a few more things to lay the foundation. Now we've already put in a H1 tag here, and there are other ones like H2, H3. We'll cover that actually right after this video. I just want to get the coding out there first, and then we'll circle around and explain a bit more about what these things do and what they are. But you could tell here just by looking at it that this is big text to grab your attention like a headline in a newspaper. And this is just your standard everyday text like you would write on a paper. But now let's make something a bit more interesting. Most of your websites will have files that start up here, and then you keep scrolling and scrolling and scrolling and scrolling on the side. Let me change the size of this. And so what we want to do first, and it may be named differently for different projects, your preferences, whatever. So we're going to make something called assets. And assets is just going to have image. Now, sometimes this is named image. Sometimes it's not. It's like I said, it's up to if someone already coded it before you or you're choosing the naming convention yourself. So let me pull an image over and let me find a really good one here. So I have this picture, but this is one of my favorite pictures of him. And so I have this picture of my dog, Bernie. It's inside of this folder here. So how do I tell the index file I want this picture of him in here? Well, first we're going to come in and type img. Once again, this is Emmett. It does help to kind of memorize the flow of what some of these elements should look like. But I hit img, then I hit enter, and then I have this thing called source. So what I'm going to do is type // because I'm just trying to get the relative destination to where I should go. And you can see that IntelliSense extension for the path is already kicking in. It says, okay, well, we could either point to the file that you're currently in. It doesn't make sense because there's no picture of my dog in here. Or there's this other option called assets. So we could click on this, and then we see picture of my dog Bernie right there. So we click on that, and then there's this thing called alt. Alt means if there's no picture or there's a screen reader or something like that, it is the text that will display. And I'm telling you right now, never envision your website, even though it's not like you want to be exclusionary, but don't just build it willy-nilly. Make sure that you're building it for people of all different types of vision, disabilities where you can. And it is a little bit of extra work. And when you do go to corporate America, you'll have to go through different kinds of checks, and other teams will come in and ensure that what you're doing is proper for everyone. But Alt is a very simple way of getting started. And it's just, what is this image? Picture of my dog, Bernie. So we're going to hit save. And so I guess I left my computer on overnight. So I guess it's the hot reload is kind of working kind of funny here. But regardless, we have this gigantic picture of him. Look at that big nose right there. And so this is cool. We got a picture, but it's really huge and you don't want to deal with this. This looks terrible. You may have pictures of your own dogs or whatever on here and you think it's the cutest thing ever, but to someone else who is trying to use your site, also scrolling left and right on a website is a big no-no. So we could come in here and there will be a much better way to deal with this later on when we get to CSS. But we could do something like with, and we'll do, say, 50%. So now it brings the picture of Bernie down to 50% of what it was. And this is much, much, much easier to deal with, which is, I think, this looks nicer. It's not the best looking website, but it's not this big bloated image of my dog. So now that we have that, let's do something else. So let's make a folder up here and we have a thing called pages. And so what is pages? Well, I'm going to designate pages to be a folder that contains all of my other pages in my website. So let's make one called Bernie.html. And so there's nothing in here. So what do? We do the same thing we did in index.html. We have all this good stuff here that I already explained. Don't forget to change your title here. About Bernie. We have this hi, woof, woof right here. But we can't see any of that. We can't see any of this, this text here. So how do we get to it? And so what we're going to do next is we're going to make a link. So we're going to come down here. We're going to hit A. I'm going here to select link. And this is actually going to a web address here. So HTTP, you typically want HTTPS because you want it to be more secure. But what we could do is the same thing we did for the picture. We have the option of pages. I hit enter, Bernie.html, hit enter. And then we could have in here, click to learn more about Bernie. Hit save. And you see it appear right here. Now, let's go ahead and do this. Now I have a paragraph tag. I'm going to put it on the outside of the A tag right here. So the A is what's making this a link. So we're going to save it again. And you see that it moves it down to the line below. There's more about this and why later when we get to CSS and we describe kind of the flow of some of these things. So we could click this and we go, hi, woof, woof. Now we're on about Bernie. We could click back up here, but you don't always want the user clicking these arrows. We've all been to those websites where you click back 5,000 times just to get out of a site, and it's very annoying. And also, say you're selling a product, you want to have navigation built in a very easy way that just makes your user just move around inside of your website more easily. You want to give them options within rather than using the native browser. So let's come back here. And how do we make a link going back? Well, we could come in and do this. We're going to hit P to get our paragraph tag. I'm going to hit enter just for formatting purposes. We're going to do another one here. Okay, so this A tag right here is without the website assumption there. Go to homepage. So I'm inside of this and I'm inside of pages and I need to get back to index. And this is one of the things that's important in programming, not just when you're doing some complicated algorithm, but for really anything. You have to ask where you are, and then you have to ask where do you want to go? Because that where your endpoint is, your destination, your outcome, is going to influence the steps to get there. And that's very, very obvious. But with this, you are inside of a file, or a folder, I should say. You have a file inside of a folder. And this could be inside of a million folders. And it's going to be the same process. So we have this right here. And so this is kind of the relative to where we are. And so we have // and there's burning HTML. Why? Because this is looking for stuff that is like nearby at its level in the directory. This whole thing is the directory here, but since we're inside of pages, this right here, // is looking for everything else inside of pages. But index HTML is outside. So how do we tell it to, look? We come back here and we add one more dot. So .. // and now we see index. We're going to save here. And trust me, hot reload works. I just rarely turn off my computer, and sometimes it causes issues. So, okay, it works in this case. Go to homepage, and now we're back here. And so this is a way that you could add a picture. You could also hard code a style in there, which I don't recommend doing. And like I said, you could do it for now, but later on there's much smoother and more robust ways of handling images. And this is also how you could link to different pages. And I also showed you, once you're inside of a folder or inside of multiple folders, how to work your way out to where you want to go. So in the next section, what we're going to look at is some of the more common elements you're going to start off looking at. It'll be a little bit more of a slideshow here for HTML. And then right after that, for the last section, what we're going to do is I'm just going to go to a random couple websites and look for cool stuff to just add into my page. And then it'll be your turn on your end to go ahead and kind of repeat the same process. So I'll see y'all in just a moment. So we've seen me go through and do a few examples so far. And someone may say, well, you just kind of type and you talk, but how much more is there to this HTML stuff than just this H1 element tag thing where we put some text in there and a paragraph tag, a link, and an image? Like, what is that? Am I a master in HTML now? And I would say largely you're not a beginner anymore, I would say, because it's very easy to get up and get going in HTML because it's meant to be very quick and to the point. You're not trying to do any advanced functionality with it. You're not trying to do truly any meaningful advanced styling with it. It's just there to denote information on the page. Now, there are a lot, and I mean a lot, of HTML elements, but if you already know how to put text and image and links on a page, you could do lots of other stuff as well. But let's start back to the beginning. And you saw that I put the H1, the heading tag on there, but there's actually 6 of them. H1 being the largest and H6 being the smallest out of those. We saw me use the paragraph tag there, and that's just text, right? Like you would have while you're writing a paper, text document, something along those lines. It's the, what would be the standard 11 or 12 point font text in an essay you're writing. We also saw links, extremely important. Every website has links that I know of to. I don't think I've seen a website that doesn't have links. And then we also have images. Images are incredibly important. And if you're not using images, you are still, in a way, working with images because you want to show more than just a white background with black text. You want to provide meaning. So images aren't just pictures of my dog Bernie, even though I love him a lot. Images could also be art, different, colors on the page. And when we look at examples, we're going to see that images don't just have to be, stock images of someone giving a thumbs up so you could tell someone to buy your product. It could truly be artwork that you put on there to make your background look a lot cooler. So I am going to say there are some other things, though, that you could look at, inspect, go off on your own and check out, because this is a beginner course, but I always welcome having fun and trying some things out. I remember in my intro to web development class, I would find lots of different ways to add stuff in that was just outside the scope. For instance, one thing you could do is you can add emojis if you wanted to. Emojis are perfectly legal. You could use them. They're part of UTF-8, which we discussed when we were going over the base HTML file that Visual Studio Code gives you via the exclamation point command. You could do symbols as well. So if you want to do certain mathematical symbols or other kinds of, say, like Greek letter notation, some of you may be rolling your eyes or this is boring at this point, but some of you out there may, that may be a cool thing for you to use for a project that you want to, come up with. Also, for those out there, I've talked a lot about notes and essays and stuff. If you get good enough and quick enough with this, you can make a website be your notes for a class or notes for other things. And that could have some gigantic advantages compared to, a standard Word document because you get to customize it. You could also do other things, like you could add in video, you could add in media, you could add in YouTube videos, stuff along those lines as well. It's not just all text and pictures. You could add a lot more interesting stuff you find from the internet. Now, a little bit of that is out of the scope, but like those websites I showed you, and maybe in at the end of this video, I'll play around with some of that extra stuff to show you what it looks like. But those are just some of the basics, kind of going over what you've already seen, what some of the other possibilities are. And just to reiterate the point, I can't show you everything, but there is a lot for you to go out there and see and get started doing. And so break out of the mold and be fun, be experimental. And not every website you make has to be gorgeous and beautiful. It's really this process about learning and just getting your hands dirty. So in this final section, what we're going to do is I'm going to show you using the page we've already written here, one that has the files and all this other good stuff here. We're just going to add some other random things in here because this, at this point, is about playing with the technology, seeing what it could do, and just having fun and exploring. So my goal is to have a table in here, slap in a YouTube video, maybe some emojis, and just kind of walk through how I maybe did it when I started, but also to show you kind of a way how does someone figure out what to do along the way, right? How I kind of would do it if I was starting all over again. So we have this right here. And what I'm going to do is I just go to W3 Schools here. This is a really good layout. Sometimes it gets a lot of flack like, oh, your W3 School has been programming forever. I don't remember everything. And also, I think this is a good tool to look at. So we have a table right here, and it gives you the format, and we see that there's a table opening and then closing tag there. We have TR, which is a table row, and we see it here, and we see it here because, well, it doesn't have it on here. Let's click this example. We have 1, 2, 3 rows. This is kind of a crappy looking table, but I mean, it's HTML. We're not stylizing it. This is just how it looks. So we have a row, which makes sense because we have a table row, open and closing element. And we have these THs right here. Well, we notice that this row is wholly different than these two rows. Why? Because this TH right here is a table header. And if you notice, these are all TDs, and these are all TDs right here, which is table data. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this off to the side of my screen so you can actually see me type it out. And we're going to make some just dumb table, probably still centered around my dog because he's just goofy. So let's go ahead and come down here. And one thing we could do as well is we could add this BR in here. Now, this is kind of a cheat. You're going to want to, when we get to CSS, there's many other ways to do this. We have this BR here, and you can't see what we did. But when we come down here, let's go ahead and do something like this. And you notice that there's this like nice little gap here, and it says table down below. And that's because we have these. If we were to take them out and hit save, we see it raises it up here. So like I said, when we get to CSS, there's going to be a zillion better ways to handle this stuff, but this is kind of a nice go-to for now to create space where you need it. And so we have that there. So let's go ahead and make that table we were looking at. So I'm just going to type table in here. It makes that for me. So another cool thing about Emmet is we could start multiplying stuff out. So if I want to do table row, I could come in here and do asterisk times 3. So I'm going to have 3 rows. And now I have 3 rows. This is cool. So what if I wanted to do a table header? I could do TH times 2. And now it just kind of looks kind of funny because I haven't quite, it hasn't stylized this yet. Let me go ahead and save this, see if it does it. There we go. All right, cool. So we have a table header here. And so let's see here. For this table, we'll do this. And let's do this table about Bernie the dog. So we have games he likes to play, and then we have food. So now we have this right here. So this is our table row. So we have 2 headers. So what we should do is we should have 2 table data points because these are going to become columns. And so we're going to do TD times 2. Why did that not work? There we go. Okay, it worked that time. So for games, this is going to line up. So this first one is going to be here is chase his tire. And the second one right here on line 27 is going to correspond to food. He's Purina Pro Plan for the small dogs breed. So we're going to come down here and we're going to do this again. Save it so it formats it. Once again, that prettier is coming back into play. So our second thing for games is chase his tail, which I'm trying to get him to stop doing. So if you ever hear me get like a very terse tone and like I turn away from the mic, odds are he's chasing his tail next to me and I'm trying to flag him down to be quiet because he's really, really good at when you're on the phone or anything. He'll just get really loud next to you because he needs attention. So the next food, let's do, he really loves turkey. Turkey is his favorite. So now we see we have this right here. We have this very ugly base looking table right here. And this is not a lot of fun right here. And so when it comes to this table, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to look and see if there's anything we could do to make it look better on this page without any kind of CSS. So let's look at this. So we're coming in here and we see that there's a table very similar to how I set it up, but you start seeing the style, which means CSS. This is the next section of it. So this is kind of a bummer. We could look at this right here and we could see the headers, games, chases tire, food, Purina, pro plan, games, chases tail, and he likes turkey. This is a very, very, very ugly looking table. And I at least hope you think it looks ugly with me. Maybe you think, okay, well, that's fine. But imagine you have a table with like row upon row upon row and a lot of columns of data coming in here, right? This would get hard to read very, very quickly. So we're going to solve problems like this in the next section when we start talking about CSS and cool stuff that we could do. So this is how we make a table. All right. So let's go ahead and come back in here. Let's slap some more of the breaks in here and come down. Now, I'm looking at this here. What else can I do? What can I choose from? I did talk about emojis, so let's go look at emojis here. All right, there's some stuff about the char set attribute, UTF-8, and okay, so there's this cool stuff right here. I will display ABC. Okay, so it looks like even for the UTF-8, like the encoding right here, you could come in and instead of typing ABC, you could come in and type things this way with the ampersand #65 semicolon here. Now, I don't recommend typing your letters like that. That's kind of useless, but you're able to. Everything kind of has an encoding. But if I want to come in here and use some emojis, I could come in and let's just copy and paste this just for fun, because there's nothing wrong with copying and pasting. Put that in here. And look, now I have this emoji with giant red lips here. Let's come in and see what else we could do. Oh, it looks like we have a bunch of other values in here. So if we wanted to do that laughing teardrop, we could copy this. We'll come down here. We'll hit P for paragraph. We'll slap that right in here. And we'll see now that we have this emoji in here. Now, odds are your company you work for is already going to have a graphic designer that has custom emojis, symbols, SVGs. If you don't know what that is yet, that's fine. They're basically a picture. You can think of it as that for now. So it's nice to put these in there for your own cute stuff. But when you go into the corporate world or anywhere that's medium to a large size company, you're going to have custom versions of this stuff here. But just as a possibility for right now, you could work with this. I did also mention stuff about media support and stuff like that. Let me come over here and let me bring this over. I don't know what it is about Mr. Beast videos that are like so addicting, but there should be some kind of share. Okay, let's do an embedded. Oh, we can have a start at right here. So let's just take this. So we copied that, the embedded. Let's come down, do a couple more breakpoints. We saved it so it formatted it all in here. And now we have this Mr. Beast video from another, from YouTube now in here. And as you can see, all I did to come back was just go to share. I clicked on embed, and then you could choose a start time. I just did the beginning. And now if you want to click on it, don't think I have my desktop audio playing, but you could see clearly that it was playing right there, which is super cool. So if you have your own content or other people's videos or videos that your company has, this is a strategy to put them inside of your website. So what I recommend all y'all do is, whether you're at home, you're a student of mine, is just go to the W3 schools or wherever, look at someone else's designs here, and just start slapping some stuff together. We have some stuff on quotations right here. It's funny because it said WWF, and I was like thinking about people hitting each other with chairs and stuff like that. But really, it's the World Wildlife Foundation, I think. Anyways, you have block quotes here. So if you want a block quote like you do in a paper, you could just easily put this in here. And there is CSS that will do this for you. But why reinvent the wheel? So what I would recommend is just to go through, pull some of these things out, and get used to using some of these just basic building blocks, because you're not going to use them all the time. But it's nice to know what's out there so you don't have to reinvent what has already been created later on in your career. So in the next section, we're going to do some CSS. We're going to get introduced to that, some more HTML stuff, and we're going to keep building and building and building. So I'll see y'all in the next video.